Hi, welcome to Revenue Marketing Television, live, CMO Insights Edition. I'm your host, Jeff Pedowitz, President and CEO of the Pedowitz Group. Today we have a longtime friend and colleague, Ben Lazar, who's Chief Marketing and Product Officer at Payspan. Ben, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jeff.
Great having you. We were just reflecting, I think it's going on about 10 or 11 years now when we first met. Arrow, right?
Yes, Arrow Electronics when I was running marketing here.
So you were at the forefront. I think you were one of the very first customers that's invested in marketing automation and demand gen. Over the last 10, 15 years, we've seen a lot of change. So in your mind, what's changed the most?
So I think one of the keys is that marketing automation has really matured to the point where it's not just outbound marketing, but it's really a lot of the progressive organizations and solution providers have really taken a much more digital approach. As the kind of marketing automation wave has matured, most organizations are really kind of looking at their digital strategy, and marketing automation has really become a component of that. So some of the solution providers out there are doing a much better job at integrating a broader digital approach versus just the outbound side. They're also integrating the inbound side, the social side, and the content side.
So are you thinking differently about your marketing department today than you were 5 years ago, 10 years ago?
Vastly differently. So kind of if you really break it down, in the past, you really kind of looked at broad marketing database, kind of cleansing and managing list information to try to do outbound marketing. Now really the focus for our strategy is how do we identify specific target individuals based on ideal customer profiles, and then within those ideal customer profiles, utilize the defined personas. And we just recently did a very large persona project to identify 5 very specific buyers of the solution set types that we deliver into the marketplace. And then utilizing your marketing automation engine to build campaigns of one, and not just one prospect, but down to the one individual who might help you influence an opportunity, and down to the one individual who might be the actual decision maker.
It's a huge change. And everyone talks about personalization at scale, but it's got to be really hard to do. Right? I mean, so what things are you doing from a process standpoint, people standpoint, technology standpoint? Because we couldn't even think about doing this 5, 10 years ago. Right?
Yeah, it's vastly different now because a lot of the engines and tool sets they use, and we were just talking about the proliferation of new categories, enables you to feed different information from different types of sources that enable you to tell different types of buying indicators and different types of movement within an organization that may be publicly available or may be available through some type of subscription source. So as a great example, you may integrate some of your information into LinkedIn or into SEC filings, a lot of different sources that can drive a decision-making engine, and I think that whole decision-making process is still very much in its infancy because it doesn't really work that great yet, but it's working better. And the whole objective is really one very simple focal point. It's when your rep gets on the phone or communicates via other methodology, social or email, to an individual, that they have some conversation starter, some pieces of information that will increase the rates of response by that potential prospect.
So, everyone talks about Amazon being so customer focused, and there's legends about how Jeff Bezos has an empty chair in his boardroom at every meeting, and that's supposed to represent the customer. So they were really working hard to make sure that the customer voice is included in the decision. What do you guys do at Payspan to replicate that or do something different?
Yeah. So not to one up Jeff, but because I couldn't. But really, our focus when we discuss campaigns and markets and personas is we're looking at our customer's customer. So we're looking at how they're engaging their customer because ostensibly you're hired to do a specific job, to execute a specific function inside of a workflow that completes a specific task for an organization. And that task is usually designed around either an operational execution or delivery of some type of service to their customer. So when we look at what we're providing and how we're messaging, we focus on the customer's customer. And an example of that is if you provide some type of service and you articulate what that service is, but not what it does for the customer's customer, then you're leaving yourself significantly short in what you're delivering or articulating its value. So if you can identify what that customer's customer is seeking to achieve from their experience from that organization, you're likely going to get more people willing to engage with you because your message is going to be much higher value.
That's fascinating. So is there anything specific that you're doing to be able to get this information?
So I would say we're in the very early stages in the infancy of it, but so we just made a migration to HubSpot, and there are other tools that I'm sure can encapsulate these types of functions. But essentially, HubSpot allows us to take, I would call them today, low-level inputs as the other tools, because we evaluated lots of tools, lower-level inputs around movements of specific prospects and specific individuals inside of those prospects. So it may be job movements, it may be financial reporting, it may be social posting that they're doing, and utilizing that information so that when a rep decides to go prospect to that individual, or there's some type of inbound or outbound lead activity, that the rep can actually see that in a really simple, easy to use kind of platform, and then giving that rep the opportunity to pull from very specific and well-curated templates that they can utilize to do their reach out, whether it's phone, email, or some type of social outreach. As long as they have a really well-targeted message that's crafted based on specific research that's tuned to response rates, overall you're going to get a better level of response rate and revenue generation.
How much are your reps in your organization doing social selling?
I would say extremely limited. So in our situation, we have a very tightly defined market audience, and our market audience is in the numbers of hundreds. So we don't have thousands of prospective clients. We deal with very large entities who are enterprise organizations in the insurance market space, in the medical side, and selling to them is a very long cycle, and you have to really invest a lot of money in each individual lead and opportunity. So when you go after those folks, typically the social platform in an enterprise environment we've found not to be the most productive environment. It's typically one-on-one. There's a lot of physical event activity integrated with digital marketing, content marketing, and a lot of educational phase type of marketing. This is a lot of people know, if you're in the consumer space or you're in a short cycle, low dollar volume sell, you can sell very quickly and you can really go right to a deal and try to get to a closed online transaction. In an enterprise environment, the amount of due diligence and integration work and pre-sales work that has to go into it is vastly different. So our selling is still both a combination of digital and physical presence selling.
It's really interesting. So switching gears a little bit, we were talking before the interview. Your oldest daughter's getting married. Congratulations.
Actually, my youngest.
The youngest daughter, sorry. She really has her act together. She's 19. So I was just starting to think, what were you like at 19, or at least in the early stages of your career, and then knowing what you know now? What would you go back, and how would you advise yourself in a different way?
So at 19, it was about beer and girls. So fortunately, coming through college, I matured a little bit and was able to get into a very opportunity-rich environment. I had a couple people take me under their wing, and I started out actually not in the in the marketing world. I started out in the e-commerce world back in the early 90s, building an application in COBOL, writing COBOL code and writing help screens and deploying an application.
Pages looking for the period, right? That
Absolutely, all the syntax, but building a simple online application to do inventory availability checking, order status, and placing orders, which back then was really advanced technology, and it was all dial-up and modem access. But what I realized at that point was in building that application and deploying it out into the marketplace and driving people away from paper to an electronic platform in the early 90s, that there was a very significant future across all digital platforms inside of lots of businesses in different industries. And I matured from that to grow into the marketing, sales, and product side, because while I was technical and I was writing code and I was deploying an application, I was really selling a concept, which was stopping a workflow of paper and basically telephone and getting on a computer, which back then, particularly in the industry, I was in the manufacturing space, hard goods industry, a lot of blue collar folks, not very computer literate, or computer.
Like AS400?
Well, there were PCs, but they were, really low level type of stuff. And, going out and teaching people how to use a very simple, basic application. A lot of people, it was the first computer application they'd ever used in their life. And then growing from there and migrating and starting to take orders over the internet in 1995, and actually going to places and saying, you can access us via the internet, and having to go through and tell people what the internet was. And then from there, it just grew more into the marketing side, because I was able to sell concepts and build value propositions, which is where I've made my career since then.
So you were a future marketer in waiting.
Yes,
Yeah, I get it, because I started off in engineering, which was really known as pre-business. Anyway, so younger kids coming out now, I've talked to a lot of different executives about different management styles. What's been your experience? I mean, is it different managing some of the younger generation?
Yeah, it absolutely is. But I think that there are ways that if you understand and work with the younger generation in different cadences, that they are extremely productive, and they also understand the newer platforms that their generation are evaluating solutions and buying from. So we're in the middle of a real sea change in how the future decision makers and influencers are going to be buying and evaluating solutions. And what I found is that less hierarchical and more team-focused type work, team goal setting and team activity and team kind of focus towards a specific goal. And I see a lot of the younger generation more goal-oriented versus title and position-oriented. And at the end of the day, I really think that people are still similar, while a lot of the platforms are changing, that it breaks down to three very basic fundamentals: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. The younger generation is very much tuned into autonomy, whereas my generation, your generation, strives for it, but maybe expects it less. Autonomy is a huge and important thing for the younger generation, and they don't work in cycles of the way that we work in traditional daytimes. And they work in very different cycles, and I find myself working in those cycles as well.
It's almost like creative bursts of activity, doing a bunch of things, and then there's these lull periods, and they're doing other things.
Yeah, and sometimes those lull periods are in the middle of the day, and traditional work structures don't accommodate those well.
Yeah, we've noticed that. So, what do you think's next on the horizon for marketing? I mean, people talk about AI and ABM. I mean, is there another trend coming?
I think that AI and machine learning is going to have a lot more application in the operational side of the business before it's going to have application in the marketing side of the business effectively. So we're going to see a lot more automated AI, digital assistants, and we're already seeing that significantly. I mean, if you go into your local grocery store, most of the grocery store is self-checkout or personal checkout or no checkout, and the actual human being checkout is minimized. So we're seeing that change. Self-driving vehicles are coming very soon, probably in the next 3 to 5 years. And my next car, I'm not buying a car until I can buy one that I can walk in and push a button, because I trust the software better than I trust myself. But one of the things I don't know that we've gotten to yet, but we will as humanity, is how do we start to interact between emotional interactions versus just operational interactions between people and machines. So I think there's some significant gap to be made up there, probably in the latter part of my lifetime, but things are going to get kind of weird. So I don't think that I'll see that a lot, and I may have a hard time interacting with non-human beings at a human level, but other generations will embrace it.
It's interesting that you say that, because I was talking to a few of my colleagues last week, and a couple of them kind of like futurists. And one of them was given a Terminator type of prognosis that he was saying, in a couple of years, it's actually going to be AI marketing to AI. So that we're going to need less marketers, because AI is going to figure out the messaging, the campaigns, the channels, and on the receiving end, the AI has the screening criteria of whatever the customer is looking for. And then basically the two machines are going to talk to each other.
Yeah.
And what do you think about that? Will that really happen?
I wouldn't make any prognosis of that because I think the place where people are most needed is in the evaluation of strategy and the execution of strategy. Below that, as you get more operational, you can move machines to make those decisions because they're functional decisions. I think it's going to be less like that than we anticipate in the short term. And as usual, we always overestimate a technology's short-term impact and underestimate its long-term impact. But at some point, I just don't know if the people are needed at all.
That's kind of scary. Probably.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Regardless of not interested really in your political affiliation, I am interested in your input as a marketer. Mm-hmm. Politics changing, the channels it's using. What role is marketing playing? How's that shaping how candidates and politicians communicate with voters? So
it's interesting. The whole concept of influence is really changing a lot, and that when you start to drive down to that campaign of one to getting to the individual, that's where I think you'll probably start to see AI really and machine learning impact marketing, or in this environment, how a potential candidate would communicate with an actual voter. The real challenge is going to be with the voter, how they're going to disseminate what's reality, what's true.
Especially when you have all different kinds of foreign bodies trying to influence that. So how do you know what's real and what's not? So
what I personally hope to see in the future is that people who work in government become completely apolitical and focus only on one thing, and that is to deliver services that provide an economic environment where people can grow and prosper, and that the people ultimately themselves will make the social decisions so that we can remove the politics and it becomes solely an objective of service for elected officials. And then individuals, and as we become more electronic in our society, we can speed the kind of the feelings or the opinions of people, and that our opinions as a society would determine the politics.
Feedback. I mean, I think it's a bit of an arms race, right? Because even outside of politics, I've seen stories now where TripAdvisor or Amazon, where they're supposed to be self-rating, there's a lot of vendors that are paying people to just write fake reviews. So they could get their 4 stars or 5 stars, and then they get more traffic, so then they get more business. And there's this constant cycle of, you put something out there that's supposed to be for the betterment of society and provide real transparent feedback, then you always have someone trying to break the rules. Yeah. And so you're just like good guy versus bad guy, but now in a new channel.
Well, the bad guys usually figure out how to break the system sooner than the good guys figure out how to use it. That's typically how it works, particularly in user-based feedback and environments where individuals are inputting their opinions. So it's great. The social environments are great because you can start to really get people's opinions and input, but it's getting really difficult to sift through a lot of that. That's why I think that an environment where AI is going to be more prevalent, but I think that the human side of things, particularly in the space of technology and technology construction and distribution of solutions, I really have a hard time seeing in the near term AI drastically impacting that element. They could unduly or duly influence people as they start to make decisions, but at the end of the day, I think peer review and peer input is going to be one of the most important things, particularly in an enterprise environment. And in the consumer world, things are a lot different. It's a lot easier to cheat the system. There's a lot more people involved. But when you're in an enterprise environment, peer review is still the most important thing.
And you're dealing with a buying center, and they all have different opinions and viewpoints. So, yeah.
The procurement process will become mechanized. So
don't tell them that.
Yeah. Price pressure will become extremely, so there will be price compression, and pricing and renegotiation and contract, that stuff can really be put through machine learning and AI. because those are things that can be evaluated in the marketplace in at least a semi-automated way and ultimately a fully automated way. So that will keep people honest and make it a little bit more challenging as a vendor. So we as vendors will have to get a lot more efficient in what we build and distribute into the marketplace, because it will become commoditized more quickly by these AI and machine learning tools.
Some big predictions there. So Ben, as always, it's a pleasure talking to you. Great insights on the industry. Really appreciate you being on the program.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it.
You bet.